Recording audio. Oops. Okay, now we're recording audio. You get up the story, read the slides. If you'll be fine, it's just the intro. So GitHub is a version control software that you use. So basically, in layman's terms, all you're doing is you're downloading stuff to a cloud, and that cloud is going to save all your work. And GitHub also makes it so your changes versus like if I were to make changes to something and William makes changes to something, it looks at it and goes, okay, well, these are kept and this is changed. So it'll dynamically change what it is, just so it's more useful than just like using a Google Docs form or something like that. Some people use a Google Drive folder and it is chaos. This actually will help you because you don't have to manually make sure that all the changes from your work and their work. GitHub will have a lot of stuff for you on that. So a few terms is repository. So there's a cloud repository. That's the one that GitHub uses. You can only have a certain amount of storage there, so be clever with what you're putting in there. Then your local repository is going to be on your computer. So it's in your SSD, your hard drive, wherever it is. It'll be saved locally. Staging area is just a little pretty thing I like to refer to. It's still in your hard drive. It's probably right next to where your repository is. It's just for actual, it's for the step and the workflow of this. So to actually get the repository from the cloud to your machine, that is a pull. Whenever something goes from a place to a place, and that's their command, it's a pull. And that just gets you all the code so you can work with it. Once you've done something that you like, you can commit it. That brings it to staging. It's still on your computer. Nothing has changed on the cloud. And then once you finally are like, okay, this is good to go, it either works or I'm done for today, which sometimes it's just you're going to be done for the day and it doesn't work, but just put it down the notes. Doesn't work. It'll be fine. Once you're done with that, you do a push, and a push sends it to the repository. Good?
I just wanted to add one quick thing on benefits of GitHub, as well as like file sharing and syncing across different users. It's very useful for when you break something, getting back to a version that works.
Yeah.
So that's why stuff like the staging area is important. You can mess around with your code, absolutely delete everything, and then rewind to whatever version you want to across your entire history.
Yeah. So beat me to it. So Git is actually very useful in that effect where, as he said, you can hear it if you're watching the recording, but basically if you're working on something and you break something in your code, you can go back and see what you broke and how you broke it. Or at least you can see the code that was added to the repository and you're like, this says break code.exe. I wonder if that's what broke it. But you can go back and see every single thing that changed in the commit or in the push actually. So this is a little example. This has basically everything you'll see in a regular GitHub file. Actually, the one on the third from the lowest, the one with the arrow, that one's a little more rare. It's called a transfer, but it can happen. It's all the same metadata within the file, but it's transferred because you just changed the name. So as you can see, it's swap me with swap file. Literally all I did was change the name. But as you can see here, red means in a prior version, it was, and now it's not. And green means that it's been added. If there's no code, that means it's stayed consistently. But GitHub will usually compress the stuff that stayed the same so you don't see it. But one thing I missed on this slide was compressing the notes, but whatever. And then there's also little boxes that show you how much of it has changed. That's the little green boxes and the red box on the bottom. Since it's deleted, it's all red because it's an empty file now. It's deleted. Right. So, and this is a quick nomenclature addition. So Git is very different than GitHub. So Git is specifically the version control. This is the stuff that makes the magic happen. GitHub makes it user-friendly, because if not, it's all command line and it's very awkward to use. So Git is an open source project, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's an open source maintained by Linux. So big company, but Microsoft is taking it and makes it a bit prettier. So for anyone who's using GitHub Desktop, that's a Microsoft product, if I'm not mistaken. and it's a lot more of a user-friendly UI-based thing, where if you use Git proper, first off, why are you a masochist? And second off, it's literally it's all like Linux-based command line code. So if you're not into that type of stuff, use desktop or get copy and pasting, be a script kiddie. So yeah, as I said, these are the 3 different versions. This was copied by Brody, who's Mac. So, this is the worst version of the screenshot, but if I did it. So at the very top, that's just Git. That's just terminal. So that would be like, you have to like make sure your flags are correct. If you want to sign, you have to use -S, for example. It can be overwhelming, but you can also learn it. I learned Git after using GitHub desktop because it's just more convenient to learn it on a UI face. And then, I don't know, this is source tree.
Yeah.
Basically a step up from Git, but it's not exactly the easiest thing ever. And then this is GitHub desktop. I use dark mode, but I forgot what it was for a second because I didn't recognize it. But this one is very obvious. Like you can see, that's literally the message. So for each commit, you should have a description for it. A very short description, and then actually like list the stuff. I like to just use bullet points and just say, I added this is broken, this is removed. It's just a quality of life thing. You don't technically do it unless someone set up the repository in a way that you have to do it. But that's nerd stuff. And I'm showing you 101. This is for game jams. You don't need all that specific stuff. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about that after, but we need to get to the fun stuff. So best practices in GitHub, this is to save you. Use atomic commits. Basically, every little thing, make it its own commit, because every time you make a commit, it's now saved externally from what you just messed with. So like, basically, imagine that I'm working on code physically right here. A commit is me saying, okay, I'm done with this idea, and I put it in the box. And then your actual push should be a big idea. So I have a new enemy for the game. That's a big idea. So like all the little small things, those are commits, because one, it makes you save your data in case your computer crashes, something goes horribly wrong, or you want to revert that commit. You only revert like 2 lines of code that you change, maybe a little more. It makes it so remove that little bug or that little aspect that you don't like anymore is quick. And also, it just makes things easier to read. Like having 1, 2, 3 commits, like I don't want to parse through 500 lines of code because 3 different commits you have are just ridiculous. So it also tells you these little small items, and it also just makes it easier to think about. So atomic commits will save you in game jams, because first off, they're easy to write in tasks for like Trello or whatever, and it's just generally a good idea. And I say always make sure changes work before pushing it. That's not done, but it's a good idea in practice. So now we're going to talk about one more thing. This is more for open source. This is not you working within a team. This is you working with someone else's code. I'm only going over this because today you're going to be using this, or I'm going to be showing this at least off in a demo. So this is called pull requests. So it's literally the same idea as a push, except there's a little more validation. So as you can see, there's that little, instead of push going directly to the cloud, there's a little bit of verification right there. That's that little guard. What happens is people externally get to look at your code and say, oh, I like this, or oh, I don't. And you can basically make sure that things won't break too heavily. So if you've ever heard the term open source, it's just literally, I made some code, but other teams can work on it. And this is how they usually do it, because this makes sure that the general code, like the overall repository, is safe when other people push the code in and they may make it a little messier. So this is a way of quality control, I guess is a way to put it. And this is actually an example of a pull request I did recently. I'm kind of doing a mentor program type thing in Amazon, and it's called OpenSearch. So it's a bit hard to read because I put but basically at the very top, there's a pull request. I didn't add something that I needed to. So he says it right there towards the middle. And he's like, hey, I want you to add this. So I added it. You can see the changes in the log. And then eventually he approves it, which is a little check mark at the bottom. And then it was merged. So nice little fluency thing to make sure that everything works in the code. And pull requests are huge in open source. There's a lot of them. So now we're going to go over actually getting the repository and cloning it. So everyone that's ready, get ready. So I actually gave a link to the repository in the announcements. I added it as an edit. So everyone just go onto that repository using the link in the announcement, and you'll be able to see this page. So what we're going to do is we're going to fork it. So basically forking is just making it so you have your own copy of the repository. So it's nothing difficult. It's just saying, hey, I like this repository, but maybe you don't have the rights to work in their version of the repository, so you make your own version, which is just the idea, because as fun as it sounds to give every single one of you access to the UF Develop GitHub account, or at least the repositories in that would be a nightmare. And also just logistically a bad idea. So I'm going to have all of you fork it so you can make your own versions, and also you can change the game to whatever you want. And if you make smaller edits, you can also push it back to the main version to make it more of an actual game rather than just a very ugly tech demo. So is everyone here that wants to copy the demo? Is everyone roughly here? Cool. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit fork at the top right here. It's going to ask you to, it's basically going to say that you don't have a fork of the repository. Obviously, you haven't done it yet. So you're going to make a new one. So just create a new fork. And it's going to make sure that the name is valid. So by default, it just will use the same name that you see with develop. And once you validate that, it's going to say, first off, it's asking if you want to copy the main branch only. That's node stuff, but I'll make it quick. Basically, sometimes you may want to copy other branches because they're doing like stuff off of the main branch. Yeah, like a beta branch. Like they may have a version where it works with iPhone or works with Android. So if you want to copy those experimental branches along with the main, then you can. But main branches are usually the most stable. Hopefully, they should be the most stable. And you probably just want to copy that, especially if you're going to be working on it in open source. Very rarely will you copy anything other than the main branch. You just create a new fork. This is pretty simple. I'm just walking over it step by step because it's just nice to make sure that you got everything. So now when you go to your repositories, you should be able to see it. It should be at the top. If it's not, Control F. You can find it. And then this is just making sure that it's on your account now. So now that it's on your account, you can clone it to your PC. So you can have it locally, so you can edit it. Because right now, it's just a big, beautiful ball of nothing. So, that shows your activity. It's a little GitHub thing. You can see how much activity there is in programs. So when you're working on something more, there'll be more activity with it. So yeah, it can shame you into not working on something for a long time. So I'm going to show this in desktop just because it's visually the easiest way. Git is ugly code. If you were curious about using Git, or if you downloaded Git, not GitHub, I can help you after. But for this, I'm just going to show you generally. Or you can Google what I'm saying to do. So what you're just going to do is go to File, and you're going to clone your repository. The two options at the top will mean that you're starting it from scratch. You're not. It already exists on your account. So you're going to clone it. And this is asking you what you're doing, because whenever something's forked, it assumes it's going to be something like open source, where we may want to give changes back to the old repository. So this means I'm going to contribute, or I'm planning to contribute to the place I forked this from. So I'm going to give back some changes. And then if you hit the opposite for my own purposes, that's just saying I'm probably not going to make edits to it. I would almost always do this, contribute to the parent project, because you may eventually add to the parent project. And it's a cool little thing to show, because it's a show-off thing. If any of you guys are computer programmers, or computer science students, having projects like this where you've contributed to an open source is huge, because you're not going to be working from scratch most times at a company. So being able to show that you can do this type of stuff with version control is very nice. So now that you've done that, it's going to clone to your computer. I didn't show that graphic, but it's cloning to your computer. So it'll save somewhere locally, which once it does, you'll be able to say, okay, cool, it's cloned my repository. Now I can use it. So as you can see, it's right there in GitHub Desktop. Make sure that it's the right thing. Depending on it, you may be in different branches. That's the stuff I was talking about earlier. We'll go a bit deeper into what branches are a little later, but it's just going to be like your finished game basically. So make sure you're on main. So now once you go to Unity Hub, you can actually literally just take that folder that you cloned and run it as a game, and it'll be working. So what you do is you open it. You're going to choose select from disk. Remote project means that you use Unity's cloud service, I believe. So you're going to do disk instead, so you can actually access it. Just go to wherever the file is saved on your computer. And this is very important. Do not use this folder. You're going to have to go inside once to the actual project folder. If you do that, then you'll be able to run the game. If you do this one, it will not run. It'll say error, could not find game profile or something like that. Once that happens, it's going to add project, and it should just immediately be done. So we're going to have to click on it. And then once you click on it, it's going to actually generate the game. So it'll take a bit. It'll generate the assets. You have to wait for it generates the game. So is everyone following so far? Cool. Anyone have questions? Just general confusing points? I am going pretty fast because I want people to actually use the game. Copy from URL absolutely works. Wait. Copy from URL for repository. Doing that means that you have access to the repository. You don't have access to the repository. That's why you have to use your URL for the repository you fork from. Is it using? So check the URL. Is it your or is it develop UF? Which would be like github.com/ your username / repository name. So it's your repository, then yeah, you can clone from link. Yeah, that's totally fine. Okay, I didn't know that was a GitHub desktop feature. So what you're saying was if you copy if you use the URL that I have in the Discord and the announcement, and you try to make that repository, it's going to say you don't have access to it. Would you like to make a fork? Basically in GitHub, by default, you do not have access to repositories. They're like little fortresses. And unless I give you an account, if I just say to put your account in and say, I want this guy to be able to edit my repository, and then they have to accept it, and then we can edit in the repository. So that's one of the reasons that you need to fork stuff, is because you have to convince the owner of the repository to let you in. You can't get in otherwise, unless you hack their account, but I can't legally recommend that. Not a good idea either, because once they notice you're in, you're going to get kicked out, hopefully. So how's the download coming?
I've been sitting in here for a while.
And it's still downloading. Lovely.
No, I've been sitting here.
Oh, it's in the game.
Yeah.
Is everything in the game?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay. Probably it's going to depend on the computer. What percentage is the bar at, roughly? 30? Lovely. I think I want to play Hangman. So once you do, you'll have the game. It won't have this. Oh, geez, I'm showing the wrong screen about people that are live. So the one thing is, it won't show this. It'll actually just have a white screen. That's because you're not in the scene yet. You're going to have to open assets, content, scenes, and then double click on this. Once you do that, that column will actually fill with stuff that's already in the game. So those are all the different prefabs. We went over this in the previous lecture. And now you'll actually see a game display, and you'll be able to actually play something now. So instead of having nothing, basically, like if you run this without the scene, I don't even know if that will complete. I've always just made the scene immediately. So you actually like have gameplay to use. Make sure you do it. So now you have a game for the 2 people that have it fully compiled. You can actually play it. Just hit the little play button at the top, and you can play it. To show it in, it works. So now I'm to approve a pull request. It's going to take me a second because I need to log into my GitHub because the computer crashed. In more sense, you have someone approve it. Are you approving it right now, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to force it through. If you own the repository, you can force it through, or you have owner privileges. But if not, and once someone approves it, you can reload the page. It'll say someone's approved it. You can actually see who approves it. Waiting for the little comment because he's cute. All right, and then you can just hit merge request. Anyone can do this at this point. Once there's enough, you can actually say how many approvals it needs to. So if you have like a committee you want, this doesn't matter. It's just saying the commit. That's just a little name, but that's what I had from the pull request. So if you want, I can show you how to make a pull request later too. But that's kind of beyond the scope because realistically, you're not going to use pull requests for your game jam. I'm just doing this for a specific reason. And that's because now the two people, actually everyone in this room that has a clone of the repository is now outdated. Everyone, because I added one game character to the game. You are outdated and therefore cringe, and thus you must update it. So, well, so in your case, you're going to do a lot more than the other people. I picked up on the mic, so if not, it just sounds like I'm mean, which I am, but at least I need a reason to be mean. So as you can see now on my copy, it'll actually say how many commits I'm behind. Since this was just one commit and one push, it only says one commit. But like if you are doing atomic commits, this number can be insane. I once had a repository that was 512 commits behind. And one hit because I made one change that they didn't have in the master fork. So as you can see, it says there's one behind. So literally, was GitHub is user friendly instead of Git. You can literally just click on it. I believe it's sync file, yeah, sync fork, right? But that's how you'll always be able to update things. And the reason I wanted to share this today is because I want you to imagine for a second that it wasn't just me and myself between those two interactions, where there was actually more people going to the cloud. Because where on the GBM, like on these notes, I do show it as like this is one person's work. You've got to imagine it more in like a 3D space where there's so many different users because each one of these copies, like the cloud is singular, but there's every other object you see in that work line is unique for each person, besides the pull request, but that's kind of like a centralized thing everyone refers to. So basically everything that's internally stored is going to be multiple users. So like you need to recognize that you can't have a bunch of merges at the same time without having some error. That's one of the biggest issues with GitHub is when you're working in complex files in Unity, there's some files that are just don't merge well. And if you have two people that both have a pull request approved, or in even worse case, you just have two pushes, there's no validation at all, and there's just two pushes, you can have something called a merge conflict, which is just quite literally, GitHub looks at the two different so the two different pushes and goes, I can't merge this smartly. So then you have to send someone over, one of the GitHub wizards you need to send over to actually merge that thing in the same way. Because at that point, you need to tell GitHub how to merge it. And that's when it gets fun, because that's when you have to use command lines. That's when you cry. I think there's 10 ways to do it on the website, but if you want to do it dynamically and actually like save most of the code that's in that conflict, you're going to have to go down to CMD. So just keep that in mind when you're working in GitHub to make sure that you're being smart with your repositories. Try to get people to work on different ideas. So they're working on different assets, because if they're working on different assets, there can't be a merge conflict, because merge conflicts only exist when you have the same object being worked on. So one more thing, I showed all the work today as a fork. A branch is probably more what you're going to use for a game jam. It's just quicker. Having everyone approve things over and over again would get redundant. And also that means that each individual person has their own repository, which not only makes it so GitHub has to allocate more storage to one idea, but it's just not a good idea. I did it here because you guys may want to make your own from the very bare bones structure we have. But in general, you should be using a branch, because Well, they both technically give you a unique copy you can work in. One of them gives one cloud copy and then the local repository that you have. The other one makes it so you're just allocating a lot more space and it's in different places. There's just more lines of failure, basically. So, and also a game jam's in 48 hours. You do not want to make it, you want to make it as simple as possible. Complexity is your enemy. So, like, and it also just keeps it so you're all working in the same cloud instead of having to like worry about a push request, a pull request that comes from one person's repository that isn't working because they didn't sync with main before they pushed it, and then it becomes a whole nightmare. Which technically you can do pull requests within a team, that you don't have to have an external repository. That's just for forking. But just keep that in mind. If you work in a branch, it's just a little itemized thing. I showed them. I should make this quicker, but like a branch is just a little thing you toggle, and it'll just give you a different copy. It's you technically check out a branch, I believe is the official GitHub Git term for it, but it just makes it so it's a very quick switch. Like quite literally, you can just hit current branch, just hit the little drop down menu and change the branch, and that's what you should be doing for most of your GitHub work. Is just make a new branch for a new idea, make sure it works all the time, and then send that merge to main. And that's just the neatest way of going at things, because you want to make sure that your ideas are compartmentalized. So basically think of your branch as like a bigger box for that smaller box that is a push. Okay. And that's basically it. Any questions about version control, just workflow in general? What?
Wait, did you say there was a game jam in 48 hours or that a game jam was?
It's 48 hours. The jam is the 19th to the 23rd.
Okay.
Practice jam. Yeah.
Practice jam, yes. Yeah.
Training ground.
Well, because the name is now Training Grounds. The UF Training Grounds is the name of the game jam. Doesn't have the word jam in it, so don't get confused, please. Because UF Training Ground Jam is just a huge mouthful. So we dropped the one syllable instead of the bigger sentences.
Currently, the title of each page that I am making is
Yes.
Level Up UF Fall 2023 Training Ground.
Make that longer, please.
Yeah.
Maybe like the sequel, Electric Movie, and something else. I don't know where that joke came from. I know. Yeah, so if we have a 20, we have a 19th, we'll be having a regular GBM that will be centralized to talking about game jams. It'll literally be just before it opens. It'll open at 6. So really the last like 5 minutes or so, we're probably gonna have a reel that just will have our themes that we've set up. We'll be opening a form soon for you guys to like give your themes or ideas for that. And we're going to spin a wheel, and that'll be the theme. And then it opens at 6. It starts at 6. So we'll basically break from here. If we can keep the room from the solar people, we can work in here. If not, we can break off teams to Marston, Library West, et cetera, et cetera. The idea for that game jam will be that you will have either people in your team, or we'll have basically floaters. If you've ever done hackathon, we'll have that type of principle where people will be bouncing from team to team, asking questions, because we don't have a physical place to be in. We'll just have like Discord channels that you can bounce between. Or you can also help your enemies, because this is a practice jam. There will be no trophies for this practice jam. There will be.
I'll give you a big kiss.
With consent. With consent. That would be a motivation for some of you, not for others. Brody, I am not in a game team for that, but no. Okay.
Big optional.
Okay. And any questions about that or the bigger jam, which I can turn off to Michael too if you want to talk about the bigger jam.
This is actually a really good opportunity for me to.
Oh, yeah. Add time.
My part.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop the recording because at this point it's not really worth it for anyone watching the recording. So.